Welcome to Oratississe Run STEM Excellence Museum exhibit. I'm Dr. Kinney, Race Director for Oratississe Run, the curator for this museum exhibit, and the Program Director for Nyan Cares Corp. And I'm excited to discuss with you the life of Dr. James McCune Smith. Smith was born in New York City in 1813 to foundational Black American Lavinia Smith. He never knew his white father. He received his primary education at the African Free School No. 2. The institution was founded in 1787 by the New York Manumission Society, a group of governing elites, some who had previously owned slaves themselves. Their aim was to prepare free and enslaved blacks to be what they considered good and useful citizens of the state. The institution graduated an impressive roster of young men, including Ira Aldrich, an abolitionist minister and Shakespearean tragedian, and first Black actor to play Othello on the London stage. Abolitionist and activist minister Henry Highland Garnet, who like Smith was born a slave in 1815, his call to rebellion speech in 1843 encouraged slaves towards rebellion against their owners. Also, he was the first foundational Black American to address Congress. Pan-Africanist minister, teacher, and scholar Alexander Crummell was born in New York City in 1819 to free Black parents. He taught at Howard University in Washington, D.C. from 1895 to 1897. Crummell helped found the American Negro Academy with W.E.B. Du Bois and William Saunders Scarborough, and served as the first president with Scarborough as the vice president. W.E.B. Du Bois, the first foundational Black American to receive a Ph.D. from Harvard, would go on to publish the famous book, The Souls of Black Folk, in 1903. Du Bois described the predicament of Black Americans as one of double consciousness. He was also active in the Pan-Africanist movement, in which he organized a series of Pan-African Congress meetings around the world in 1919, 1921, 1923, and 1927, which brought together intellectuals from Africa, the West Indies, the UK, and the United States. All of their accomplishments are extraordinary by any standard, but even more so because they were denied their basic rights. For Smith, he excelled academically in all areas, including writing, art, and oration. Despite his academic aptitude, he was denied admission into the Geneva Medical College and the University of Columbia. He was, however, accepted to the University of Glasgow. He would go on to graduate with a bachelor's in 1835, master's in 1836, and Doctor of Medicine in 1837, ranking high in his class. He also mastered astronomy, math, botany, chemistry, medicine, midwifery, and surgery. The lineage of foundational Black Americans in academic medicines begins with Dr. James McCune Smith. When Smith returned to New York, his intellect and energy made him an instrumental figure in the emerging Black community. Smith opened a medical practice and the country's first Black-owned pharmacy. He became the first foundational Black American to publish in a peer-reviewed medical journal. He opened an evening school to teach geography and literacy skills to people of all races. He used his position and expertise to speak against phrenology, the notion that head shape and size dictate the intelligence of different racial groups, as well as debunking miscalculated statistics from the United States Census that attempted to imply psychological inferiority of Black people. He also wrote essays and gave lectures refusing inferiority. Smith prophesied the positive impacts that foundational Black Americans would make on the world. In a dissertation on the influence of climate on longevity, published in 1846 in Hunt Merchants magazine, he debunked John Calhoun's Secretary of State at that time idea that freedom for Northern Blacks resulted in higher rates of insanity and mortality rates compared with enslaved Blacks in the South using biostatistics. Smith wrote the first case reports published by a Black physician, The case, titled Tylism with Fetal Termination, was published in 1840. Smith cared for children at the Colored Orphan Asylum, founded in 1836 in New York City. Unfortunately, it was destroyed by a white mob during a riot on July 13, 1863. The children barely escaped. Smith was attacked by the mob during his efforts to help the children. The orphanage was rebuilt at a new location, and Smith kept limited hours. He was prohibited from riding in streetcars because he was black, so he walked at least 6 miles to and from the orphanage until he was able to secure transportation. In 1854, Smith was elected to the Geographical Society in New York, giving an address on ways to improve census-taking methods. He covered a wide range of topics that affect the black community, including black and female suffrage, the meaning of citizenship after the Dred Scott decision. He wrote against the Supreme Court decision in the Dred Scott case denying the foundational Black American citizenship. He proposed the idea of a mutual savings bank to elevate the social conditions of blacks. He helped brave travelers along the Underground Railroad. Smith collaborated with Frederick Douglass, Garrett Smith, and John Brown in the fight for freedom. He was valuable for his approach and scientific clout. He wrote a regular column in Frederick Douglass's paper. Smith was noted as the most scholarly abolitionist. In 1959, Frederick Douglass declared, "No man in this country more thoroughly understands the whole struggle between freedom and slavery than does Dr. Smith, and his heart is as broad as his understanding." In 1964, the historically black college, Wilberforce College in Ohio, offered him a professorship in anthropology for his scholarship on race, but he died on November 17, 1865, from heart failure before he could fill the position. Auritasisi Run celebrates the extraordinary life and accomplishments of Dr. James McCune Smith.